Hey guys, it's Kat and I am back today to talk foundations. Now, I did mention months and months ago that I am not including foundations in my project pan for a while because I wanted to test out my foundation collection, do a bit of a declutter, review the foundations that I have in my collection. And it's been really goddamn hard. All right, I just wanted to interrupt very quickly and say that this video is 2.5 months old. I actually filmed it at the start of July, so if I refer to the wrong season or anything like that, yeah, it's been a while since I filmed it. The main reason it took me so long to edit this was I just couldn't be bothered going through 6 months of photos and trying to find the foundation swatch photos, and I had mislabeled some, I had lost a lot of them, so I knew there was a lot of gaps in the photos, which was just something I couldn't be bothered dealing with. So what I did was I tried to fill those gaps this morning. So if you see me wearing the same shirt and half a face of foundation, that's all from this morning. So yeah, this video has been a bit of a pain in my ass, but it took me so long to test these foundations. I didn't want to waste the footage. So let's get on with the reviews. So firstly, one thing I've realized is I can sort of get along with most foundations in my collection, which is really good. I have over the past few years either targeted some foundations that I don't like but can wear in my project pan. So I have been getting through foundations fairly regularly in my project pan. And then if I really don't like something, I'm not opposed to throwing it out. So I have sort of just decluttered as I've gone through. So most things here I do quite like. So today I'm going to be talking about the majority of my foundations. There may be a handful of foundations that I'm not talking about today simply because I just couldn't come up with a conclusive idea of what I thought about it. A good example are both of these from Shiramura. This is the Petal Skin and this is the Light Bulb. Some days I liked them, other days I couldn't stand them. Well, not, that's a bit dramatic. I didn't like them. Some days I loved them, some days I didn't like them. And so I was just like, I'm not sure how I feel about these, so I'm not ready to give my opinion. So there are a few foundations that I have in my collection that are like that. There are some that I have unopened and I just didn't really want to open them with this amount open. So instead of doing a whole collection and including products that I just wasn't sure about, I decided to just pull out the foundations that I have strong feelings about, talk about them all on camera, and tell you which ones I'm getting rid of. Now, I know Hayley, so I do beauty news with Hayley. I know she did a video like this recently and it was quite funny because I've been testing these, I think, since February, and I've been meaning to do this video for the longest time. And I'll link her video down below because it was quite interesting. She does talk about quite a few foundations that I have here as well. But since she was on medication for her acne, her skin has become dry and she dislikes some of these that I really like. So I do have oily combination skin. I have quite an oily T-zone. The rest of my face is pretty normal and also fluctuates based on the season. So obviously in summer, I'm a little bit oilier. In winter, which we're in now, I'm a little bit less oily. I wouldn't say I'm dry by any means. So yeah, my experience here is based on oily combination skin, whereas her experience is based on dry skin. So if you want to check out her video, like I said, I'll link that down below, but we do talk about a few of the same foundations, which is really interesting. And that also highlights how different your experience can be with a foundation or a base product, depending on what your skin type is. So some people might be like, I absolutely hate that, or I can't believe you love that. And it just completely comes down to skin type. Now this video in theory should have been pretty easy. I just thought, look, I'll dedicate a few days to each foundation. I will try them, move on to the next one. I'll make notes as I go and I'll get through my whole collection. And that's essentially, I think, what Hayley did. I was talking to her about it the other week and she was saying that it was a lot easier for her having dry skin because she sort of gets the same results each time. Whereas the problem with having oily skin is because your skin can vary so much day to day and the wear time of a foundation or how it sits on your skin can vary widely. I found that sometimes I had really good results with foundations, sometimes I had bad results, and I got a little bit confused as I went. So that's why this was held up as long as it was. But I really want to get this up before I do a project pan because I do want to also earmark some of these foundations to pan over the next few months. All right, so I've sort of broken this roughly into categories. I've got some high coverage Longwear foundations. I've got some more medium coverage Longwear foundations. And then I have some more dewier, lighter sort of foundation. So I might start with the dewier, lighter ones. And in fact, I might actually start with my powder foundation because I have one powder foundation. So this is the Nude by Nature powder foundation. I only bought this fairly recently. I quite like a powder foundation on like just a quick makeup day when, you know, I'm just running some errands, I'm going down to the shops, I'm doing something and I just want a little bit of something to cover my redness and just throw on a bit of mascara or something. I don't mind a powder foundation. Now this is actually the Nude by Nature mineral foundation, which is very well known in Australia. Nude by Nature is it's a well-known brand here. And these are not cheap. I bought this, I think it was 50% off at Chemist Warehouse, and I got the shade light medium. It's C3 and it's a fairly good color match for me. I do actually like this. It does provide a nice amount of coverage. It doesn't apply patchy, where I have had some mineral powder foundations or just powder foundations in the past that when you apply it, it sort of clings to certain areas and just looks a bit patchy. I'm looking at you, Bare Minerals. But this one does apply really nicely to the skin. It does add a bit of coverage. So I'd say maybe light to medium coverage depending on what brush or how dense the brush is that you apply it with. It definitely covers up my redness. So I do have sort of redness in my cheeks and on my chin and whatnot. But this doesn't cover things like under eye bags or circles or anything. So you will need to use a concealer and then go over with this. I do like it. I am going to keep it. The only thing I don't like about it is that on my oily skin throughout the day, it does get quite shiny. So it doesn't have any oil control. So great for, you know, just looking a little bit more fresh after a couple of hours. But for long wear, this just starts to look like an oily mess. So I am going to keep this. I do think it's good for the purpose that I want it for, but I'm not like raving about it and being like, you have to go get this. It's amazing. Not that I do that to any product, but yeah, definitely not doing that to that. All right, now two products that look very similar. The packaging looks very similar. They're both drugstore. One is unfortunately discontinued in Australia and one is reasonably new, maybe a couple of years old now, maybe a year old, whatever. So I've got the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow. This is the 24-hour foundation and it says that it's a radiant finish, wears up to 24 hours, has a medium coverage and an air-like texture. And then I've also got the Covergirl Outlast Active 24-hour foundation and it's got sunscreen as well, so SPF 20. So this shade here, they both suit me really well. This one's Buff Beige and this one is Nude Beige. All right, let's start with the one that I like. I really like this L'Oreal one and it's such a shame that it has left our market in Australia because it is a really, really good all-rounder foundation for multiple skin types. I've heard people with drier skin say they love this. I have oilier skin. I think this is really, really great. And what I love about this is it's comfortable to wear. So it's not too balmy. It's not too sort of feeling like a moisturizer because that can sort of slip and slide on my skin and wear off fairly quickly. This one does set down and provide a really beautiful medium coverage. You can of course sheer it out if you want to. You can build it up in areas if you want to. But overall it covers like imperfections, but not to the point where you look like you've got cakey skin, but it also gives this beautiful sort of like radiant effect. So it's not like dewy and looking shiny. It just has a bit of a glow and it looks really healthy. But because it does set down enough, it doesn't sort of smear and slide on oily skin. And of course, if you powder it, you can get it a little bit more matte, but it is a really, really good looking foundation. And it's just one of those foundations you can reach for really easily and not have to stress about it clashing with other products or only looking good in some instances. It's a really nice foundation. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the Covergirl foundation. This is claiming to be up to 24-hour wear. It's sweat proof, transfer proof, humidity proof. It's oil free, won't clog pores. And it's supposed to be suitable for all skin types. Now, I just did not like this from the get-go. I do have notes. I'll read some of them out. So I said that this was a good color match for me, but it sort of seemed like pigment suspended in a thick lotion with SPF, and it just felt really greasy and balmy. So again, it gives you that glowy effect, but in the worst possible way for oily skin. Because this did feel like a lotion or a thick sort of moisturizer, it did apply really streaky with the brush, so it was sort of hard to get a nice even application. The coverage of this was pretty light, and personally I don't like that because it doesn't cover enough of my imperfections. So I don't want to have to go crazy with the concealer to cover like my cheeks and around my nose and my chin. I would like to just use the concealer in really small areas, and I like my foundation to give enough, not full coverage, not mask-like, but enough coverage to minimize redness, and this just didn't do it. I had to build this up to get more coverage, to make it look half decent, and I found that by doing that it just felt really thick and heavy on my skin. I'm not a fan of this. I don't think it wears super well. It's not great for oily skin. I am definitely getting rid of this one. All right, so another foundation that's sort of similar to that in concept but just works a lot better is by Mecca Max. This is the Life Proof Longwear foundation. Firstly, I want to say I love the fact that this has an airless pump, so as you pump it, it goes up. It means that you get all the product out, and it's a really efficient way to access your product, so I really like that this has an airless pump. Look, this was also one of those foundations that feel more like thick moisturizer with pigment in it. So it's not the best applying it with a brush because it can look quite streaky. I much prefer to sponge with this. If you apply it quite thinly, you can get a light layer, but unlike the Covergirl one, this one with a thin layer does neutralize redness, which is good. So you can apply a small amount and feel like you're actually wearing something that's doing something. So this does have a light to medium coverage and a satin finish, so it is a pretty, it's a foundation that a lot of people could wear, and you can get a little bit of versatility out of it by either having it applied quite lightly or built up a little bit, but I don't think it wears throughout the whole day, especially not on oily skin. One thing I did like about this though is the fact that it does tend to wear down fairly evenly and not super patchy. So when it does start to wear down, it just looks like you have less and less coverage on your face, rather than, and if you've got oily skin, you'll know what I'm talking about, rather than when your oils start to break through and you just have mass amounts of foundation just removed off your face, and then other areas where it looks perfect and that looks really patchy. This doesn't do that, but it's not life proof. It definitely starts to wear down throughout the day. This shade, which is peach, is too peachy for me. Surprise, surprise. But I can sort of make it work. So I'm tempted to pan this because I can use it on just a daily basis, but I know it's not a foundation I am going to reach for if I want to look really perfected all day long. For example, today, what time is it? It is currently about 9:30 at night, and I've had this foundation on since about 12 hours ago. This I would not be able to film in this 12 hours after wearing it. So it doesn't have the longevity that a life-proof foundation should have, but it's just a nice sort of light to medium coverage basic foundation. All right, the next product, I love this. Haley didn't like this. I should have taken hers because I love this. This is the Roche-Posay Toleriane Corrective Liquid Foundation. Now, the shade that I have is 11 Light Beige, and I think there's only like 6 shades. So this is a pretty bad shade range, but the product is really nice. Now, historically, my skin gets along really well with La Roche-Posay products, so I wanted to try this when I saw it on sale, and I would hands down repurchase this time and time again if I saw it on sale, because as it is, I think it's like 40 Australian dollars. So it's not super cheap for a brand that you can buy at like Chemist Warehouse and Priceline, which are like drugstore stores in Australia. So the thing I like about this is it provides a nice amount of coverage. It is like a medium coverage, but it's quite buildable. So in areas where you need a little bit more, you can do it. It applies really nicely with a sponge, with your fingers, with a brush. It just applies really nicely on my skin anyway. It doesn't, like Haley did say that on her dry skin, I think she said that it sort of sits on her skin, On my oilier skin, this blends in beautifully. It incorporates really nicely with concealer. It sits nicely under powders. This is such a well-behaving foundation for me. The color match is quite nice. The only thing that's really strange about it is it's got like a really strong sort of raw ingredients scent to it. When I do apply this though, the scent does always sort of distract me a little bit when I first put it on. The scent luckily does dissipate, so it doesn't linger, but it does have like a raw ingredients and some artificial fragrance to it that it's a bit weird. Like, I don't hate it, but it is very specific and it is very noticeable. I do like the packaging. I like the tube with the little narrow spout. I feel like that's a really good way to dispense product so you don't waste any, you don't need to apply too much. And for me, I think this wears really well. So it doesn't last all day because it's not supposed to be like budge proof, but it wears off in a pretty flattering way. So I'm definitely gonna put it alongside the L'Oreal Infallible. This does have a sort of more radiant finish, but I feel like they apply and on my skin feel very similar. And I do like them, so I'm keeping them both. The last foundation that I'm putting in that sort of lighter coverage, more natural effect for me anyway, is the Revlon Candid foundation. Now, I historically really like Revlon foundations. They work really well on my skin. And this one is supposed to be natural finish, anti-pollution, and what are the claims? It's medium buildable coverage, no harsh ingredients, anti-pollution, antioxidant, anti-blue light, oil-free, whatever, all good. The thing I like about this is, again, it's a nice sort of just everyday foundation. It's got a medium coverage that you can sheer out to be a lot lighter. You can build it up to be a bit fuller coverage. It does have more, on me anyway, more of a dewier finish if I don't set it down with a powder or if I set it very lightly. Of course, I can get a temporary sort of more mattified finish if I do powder it fairly well. So for me, it's quite versatile and it does wear pretty well. So again, I can sort of get a full day wear without it looking like it's breaking down too much. But again, I can see my skin through it. It looks quite natural on me. The color match is really good. This is Sand Beige 220. I really like it. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I like about this and not too many things that I don't. I think it applies really well with all types of tools. So brush, sponge, fingers. It sits well under concealer and powder. I really like it. So it's definitely one that I'm going to keep. The next category is sort of like a level up. These are sort of like medium to more full coverage foundations that do set and are supposed to be a little bit more long wearing. Talking about Revlon, let's talk about Colorstay. Colorstay is one that I have been using for years and years on and off. It's probably like my 4th or 5th bottle, and it's one of those ones that I always have at the back of my drawer as a backup when I see it on sale, because I know that my skin gets along really well with it. So my shade is 220 Natural Beige. So these are both 220, but they're called different things, but they're a close enough dupe. So Sand Beige, Natural Beige. So I really like this. I like the pump. I do actually prefer the pump with the tube because you can squeeze the product out and get right to the very end, but the glass bottle is fine. This is the oily combination skin one. You can get more of a normal skin version, and I've tried them both and I like them both. So the claims of this is it wears for up to 24 hours. It creates a flawless look. It's a lightweight feel. And I agree with that. So the way that I like to apply this is I find that less is more. This can look a little bit streaky with a brush depending on how you apply it. But I think with a sponge, this is really, really great. And I think it's one of those foundations that benefits from putting like a thin layer on. If you do apply too much or build it up too much, yes, you can get more coverage, but it can start to feel a little bit heavy on the skin. If you do want it feeling lightweight, I think less is more, and a light amount will give you more of a natural finish. Again, you can build it up to heavier coverage. And me personally, I don't like a thick layer of foundation, so I would never reach for something that's like a medium buildable foundation and expect full coverage out of it. I much prefer to go for something with higher coverage and sheer it out to a lower coverage just so it doesn't feel so heavy on my skin. So I think this is great for an everyday foundation. It does make you look quite perfected. It does set. If you've got drier skin, you can definitely skip the powdering. But if you do have oily skin, I would recommend powdering this, but I find that this wears really, really well. Probably not 24 hours, but wears nicely, and the color match for me is really, really great. So obviously I'm keeping that one. Something that's fairly similar, but I don't like as much, I would say MAC Studio Fix Fluid. My shade is N5. This one is a personalized one, so KW, my initials. I don't mind this, but I don't think it is anything special. So with this foundation, it's a good color match for me. I'm not in love with the application method, so it's pretty much just a twist off lid, and you sort of have to just tap out product. The only thing that I don't mind about this is that it is harder to get a lot of product out. So you sort of have to tip it out and wait for it and get it out and put a little bit on your face, and then do that again, and then do that again, and maybe do that one more time. And it's actually not that much product that's coming out because you're not pouring it out. You can do that, but I just sort of like tip it on my finger, get a little bit on my finger, and sort of dot it on. And by doing that, it really does control how much you put on. I am sort of notorious for sometimes over pumping and putting some on the back of my hand and then over applying the foundation and wasting it essentially. Whereas I do think less is more, and this method, even though it's a little bit messy and it's a little bit not that practical, it does really control how much product you put on. So that's one silver lining about this packaging. With the formulation, I quite like it. For me, again, it's sort of like a medium coverage. It's enough to cover redness, slight imperfections, but you can see your skin through it, so it still looks like skin. And the match works really well for me. This is a foundation that does set on its own. So similar to Revlon Colorstay, it does set down. You don't need to powder it if you don't want to. It will leave a little bit of a glowier effect if you do that, but if you touch your face, it doesn't smear and move and doesn't leave finger marks, which is my biggest pet peeve. I can't stand foundations that do that. It just does not work for my oily skin. I know that by the end of the day, it's sort of sliding off and smearing onto things and bleh. So this does set, which is nice. Pretty much it works well with all methods of application. It works well with concealers, powders. It's a decent performing foundation. I really like the look of it. The downside for me was simply that this doesn't wear as long as I want it to. So after only maybe half a day, I noticed that I've got wearing around my T-zone and my nose, my chin, and I feel like, look, if this was a higher coverage foundation, I think I would get rid of it, but because it is a medium coverage and it starts to wear off fairly naturally, I'm just going to reach for this on days where I don't have like long days, but it's not one that I find reliable that I could use all day and it looking great. I will keep this, but I'm going to keep this to pan this because I really don't need it in my collection. Another sort of medium coverage setting Longwear foundation is by Estee Lauder. This is the Double Wear Light. So it's a soft matte Hydra makeup. This is the new reformulated version, and this shade is 2N1 Desert Beige. This is a pretty good color match for me. Now, Estee Lauder Double Wear is known for being a very high coverage matte set long wearing foundation. Now this one is just a more sort of daytime friendly version. So Estee Lauder Double Wear, the original, used to break me out because it was quite heavy. This one is not like that at all. This definitely is a little bit more hydrating and it is more medium coverage. And I think it's best kept at medium coverage or sheet out to a lower coverage. If you try to build it up to a higher coverage, I feel like this sometimes lifts on itself. So as you sort of try to build the foundation, it doesn't sort of just layer nicely, it sort of picks up the foundation underneath. So it is best just to keep it as like a fairly thin or medium layer. But the good thing about this is it does have a bit of radiance to it, but it also sets. So sort of similar to the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow. This one it can look a little bit radiant, but it doesn't feel like it's melting off your face, or if you touch it, it's gonna smear. So you don't necessarily have to set this if you prefer that dewier finish, but if you have oily skin or you want to get a little bit more longevity out of it, powdering it does mattify it a little bit, but again, you still get that sort of medium coverage that covers most of your imperfections without it looking too heavy like the original does. Now this wears off in the way that I like foundations to wear off, which is sort of subtly. I know it does start to wear off throughout the day. You don't have as much coverage at the end of the day than you have at the start of the day, but I do find that it wears down quite naturally, and there's no obvious patches or oily zones. It does hold off oil pretty well. So yeah, this is more of a bougie version of something like this or the Revlon Candid. So I think you can get similar things a lot cheaper than this. So I like it, I will use it, but I would just prefer to go the drugstore ones because I feel like they do just as good a job for less money. If I went back to working full time in an office and I was putting my makeup on at like 7:30 and taking it off at like 7:30, this is one that I would probably really appreciate. So there is a place for it. But yeah, there we go. Next one, and this is one that was supposed to be on the makeup breakup, but we went into lockdown and then I think they discontinued this. So, or at least it's heavily reduced on a lot of websites. So this is from Kat Von D, and it is the True Portrait Liquid to Powder Foundation. This is the shade Light 018. I've only started using this recently. I opened it up to test for this project. Besides that, I just hadn't ever used it. And surprisingly, I quite like this. I keep reaching for it. This does have, it's very, very liquidy, and it's got this sort of like spout that you just sort of squeeze product out. These little windows are, whoa, that just sprayed everywhere. So you can squeeze the windows and get it out, so you don't need to like shake it or anything. But when you do open this up, you want to shake it to mix the product up. Again, like I said, it's very liquidy. How I like to actually apply this is just sort of like, I move my fringe obviously. I sort of just do a couple of lines, and then I get a sort of kabuki style brush and I blend it in. This is actually a really nice foundation. I don't think, we bought this after Kat Von D left, so she wasn't getting any of the money that we spent on this, and I think we did get it half price. But I would buy a backup of this if I saw it on sale and my shade was there. Again, this is a very liquidy foundation. It applies a nice amount of coverage, again enough to cover imperfections but not hide the skin. This does have a more of a soft matte finish, so if you had dry skin and you like the matte look, you wouldn't powder this. If you had oily skin, I would powder it personally, and I do. But I just feel like this is a nice medium coverage foundation for people that like a more matte finish or a more set foundation, and I find that this wears really nicely. I haven't had any issues with it clashing with any products that I pair it with. All makeup looks nice over it. And at the end of the day, I don't find there's any like obnoxious wearing going on. So I don't go, oh, there's no foundation around my nose or it's worn off on my forehead. It just seems like it's a good medium coverage matte foundation. I like it. The last one is one that I was convinced I was going to get rid of, and I've actually decided I might pan this. It's the L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Matte. This is in the shade 20 Sand. I do much prefer the Pro Glow. On my oily skin, you would assume that the matte one is better, but I just feel like this is just an all-round better foundation. But I can still use this, I can still enjoy it, and even though it is a matte finish, I actually don't feel like it's that drying, if that makes sense. So they're saying that the texture is medium instead of air light like this one is. It's supposed to have a high coverage and a matte finish. So again, what I tend to do with this one is it's got a squeezy tube. Again, I like that. I squeeze a little bit onto my face and then I get a buffing brush or a damp sponge. I blend it out, and again, I apply quite a thin layer of this to make it feel a lot more comfortable and just give a more natural finish. And it does hold up pretty well throughout the day, and it does hold your oils fairly well as well. Now, I have been using this in winter. I think in summer, this might not hold up as well. I also, from memory, when you do build this up to a more full coverage foundation, it can look a little bit cakey and not apply as well. So yeah, I would recommend if you have this and you're not sure about it, try to use less. Less is more with most of these sort of mattifying higher coverage foundations. But I wouldn't repurchase this, but it is definitely one that I can use up, and the color match works for me right now, so I might target this one first. So even though that was technically a high coverage foundation, I don't really use it as a high coverage, so I didn't include it in the high coverage category, but now we're moving on to that. First one I want to mention is the Australis Fresh and Flawless Full Coverage Foundation. It's infused with vitamin C and it's SPF 15. Now this is similar in texture to the Kat Von D ones. They're both equally as liquidy as each other, and they both need to be shaken up before used, and they both have a similar application. So this one has this fancier just like tube and squeezy part, and it just looks fancier. This one just looks like a little rectangle, but it has the same concept, squeezy tube, and you squeeze the sides to pour it out, and it's very, very runny and very liquidy. The difference between the two is this is a higher coverage one, but I think they both perform really nicely on me. Again, I wouldn't reach for this one to build up and get full coverage. I think it would look quite heavy on the skin. Also, even though this does have quite a large shade range, I think it's 30 or 40 shades, I feel like the shades are a little bit off. They're a little bit too yellow, they're a little bit too orange. So I sort of struggle getting the perfect match. This is my second one I have tried, and this is the shade Natural Buff. I sometimes have to tweak it with sort of mixing drops or whatever just to get the right color to it. But I do think that this wears really nicely if you apply a thin layer. Again, if you apply too much, it's just gonna feel cakey, and when it starts to wear off, it's gonna look patchy. But buffed in with like a sponge or a buffing brush and a thin layer, this is beautiful and wears really, really well. This is a great summer foundation. If you've got dry skin, you might find this too drying. I probably wouldn't go for it. But if you do have oilier skin, this holds up really nicely, and it can look fairly skin-like if you apply a thin layer of it. So yeah, I like this. I'm keeping it. It's my second one and it's nice. One that I'm wearing today is the Clinique Beyond Perfecting Foundation and Concealer. Now, this was the first time I used it, not today, but in this project. I actually had this at the back of my drawer for a while, and I thought when I've used up a few full coverage foundations, I'll pull this out and give it a shot. And I really like this. This is in the shade Linen, and this is a doe foot applicator. It's got a really big doe foot applicator, so you can use it as a concealer, or you can use it obviously as a foundation. And I actually don't mind this applicator method. I know a lot of people think it's grubby and that it's unhygienic, but I do my makeup after I do my skincare. So I've washed my face, I've put on skincare. The only thing that's getting back onto the wand is generally sunscreen. So it's not that big a deal in my opinion. So I don't mind this. I just put a couple of dots again, and then I blend it out with generally like a kabuki style brush. I feel like this applies really nicely. It's not streaky, it blends well. This shade works really well on me. I'm wearing it today. I've been wearing it for 12 hours. So it definitely lasts a long time. And again, it's like a broken record. Less is more. If you want to build it up, you can. I just feel like it can look quite heavy on the skin and quite mask-like. But this is more of your sort of special occasion going out type foundation where you just want to look a little bit more perfected and you want to know that it lasts. I would totally use this. Now, in terms of a concealer, I don't really use this as a concealer. I do think that because it is a higher coverage foundation, you have to do less concealing, but I wouldn't take this right up under my eyes just personally. I don't know, I think it just, concealers work better. So I'm definitely keeping this. It's one of those foundations that I love reaching for if I'm filming or if I'm going out to a dinner and I just want to look a little bit better. I think this is great. One that is not so great is this one by Mecca. So this is the Ultimate Coverage 24-Hour Foundation, and this shade is Vanilla. I did not like this. It is a pump style foundation, and this is super, super thick. Now, I don't know if it's super thick because that's the formulation or if it's just because it's getting old and it's just like drying out and clumping up, but it is thick. Now this is super high coverage, but the thing that's annoying is it doesn't apply very smoothly on the skin. It requires a lot of buffing or blending to get an even effect, so it's quite a hard one to get on your face. I do feel like this does apply better with a sponge though, so I would recommend this with a sponge. I also found that this one oxidizes a little bit, so when I first applied it looks quite light and then it sort of just gets a little bit deeper throughout the day, which I don't mind because initially the shade is too light for me, so as it develops throughout the day it does look better on me. But the reason why I'm getting rid of this, besides the fact that I don't enjoy applying it, I feel like it's hard to apply, but I'm getting rid of it because after like 4 or 5 hours, this like wears off patchy. And the thing that's really annoying about it, so patchiness is my pet peeve. And what is really annoying about it is that you can't fix it. It's the kind of foundation that when you then go into maybe blot and put a little bit of concealer to just touch up around the nose where it's starting to separate, it just keeps pulling away from the skin. So you can't actually make it all meld back together. It just sort of separates further and further. And if you're tapping here, then you're lifting more product here and you end up having to take your base off and redo it. So this is a lost cause. I hate it. I don't like it. It's going. You're dead to me. The next one is a foundation that I have actually used up one of them. I actually mixed it with a BB cream and it made a perfect match. This is the Hourglass Vanish Seamless Liquid Foundation, and this is in the shade Shell. The one that I had previously, I'm not sure what shade it was a little bit deeper, and to lighten it and to lighten the coverage, when I mixed it with a BB cream, it made the most perfect medium coverage, sort of like satin effect. So this one's a really good one to mix if you just want to tone it down, or if you want to ramp up the coverage of like a tinted moisturizer, you can totally mix this with it and it works great. Now this one's a bit of a fickle one, and there's parts of me that's like, is it worth keeping because it's fickle? You just said that this was too much work to put on. Why would you like this one? This one has a similar vibe to the Becca one. It's a pump, it's very thick, and it's a very, very full coverage. Now what Hourglass suggests with this is to apply half a pump and really buff it into your face. Now, I don't think half a pump, maybe my face is too big, I don't think half a pump really spreads across the face because this can sort of, it's like because it's so thick, it doesn't glide over the skin. So it doesn't spread over easily. It does take a bit of buffing and it can dry a little bit as you're doing that. So I definitely think you need a full pump, but one pump can definitely do your whole face and even a little bit down your neck. Now, this does not apply great with a sponge or your fingers. It is best applied with like a sort of dense kabuki style brush. And when you do use it that way, it's actually a really beautiful foundation. It gives you a nice amount of coverage and it does play really well on oily skin. This is one of those foundations that, depending on the weather, it can look really fantastic, or it can sort of start getting oily fairly fast. But more often than not, I've had a really good experience with this, so I am gonna keep it and I'll eventually pan it. But in the scheme of things, like, is it as good as the Clinique one? I would say it gives a similar finish and a similar effect to the skin, but this one is just a little bit easier to apply. It doesn't require a specific way to apply it, but I do like this, and when I do use it, I think it's a really beautiful sort of like photography or filming foundation, so I am going to keep this. The last one I actually have 2 shades of because I couldn't find my perfect shade match, and I liked this foundation so much that I thought I'll buy 2 and I'll mix them together. So this is the Smashbox Studio Skin Full Coverage 24-Hour Foundation, and I've got the shades 1.15, which is a fair light with warm peach undertones, and I've also got 2.15, which is a light with cool undertones. So together, it's a really good shade match for me, and I can sort of pick one and wear one in summer, wear one in winter, but I really like this. And this is, one thing I didn't say about this, people with dry skin will not like this. I've seen super mixed reviews on this, about this online, and it's one of those very, very polarizing foundations. And I feel like when you have oily skin, you love it and you appreciate it. When you have dry skin, you're like, that makes my skin look flaky, it looks patchy, it doesn't sit well, it's horrible. So warning with this one, if you've got dry skin, don't buy it. But if you love Hourglass formulations and you've got oilier skin, you will like this, and the same goes for this. I have heard that people that have dry skin still can wear this and still can appreciate it, but it is definitely better for people with oilier skin. Now this is quite high coverage again, so small amount, buff it in. This is easier to apply in multiple ways, so sponge, brush, fingers, you can apply this quite easily. Since these are quite full coverage, you know, you'd want to, again, apply less and build on it if you want to. This does cover like all imperfections, and if you apply a thicker layer, it will like blank out your face. So I don't like that blanked out look. I think these are great when you take a small amount and you buff it in, and even maybe if you just applied your skincare and you've got a bit of dewiness to your skin, or you have a hydrating primer, these really can blend with that and create a really beautiful look. Look how freaking good this looks. Full coverage, yeah, but it can still look pretty good if you apply a thin layer. I love it. I love it. This is definitely for those long days where you want to look sort of perfected all day long. These wear fantastically. So some days I've had, and I don't know what it is, I feel like if I have any dry patches because the weather changes or something, sometimes I've had a few issues with these sort of gathering in certain areas, but generally on my skin, these work super well. So I'm keeping both of these. All right, so those are the current foundations that I have in rotation. Like I said, there are a few others, including Shuramira and a few others that I just haven't wrapped my head around. I feel like from day to day, how they work changes so much that I can't reliably say, yes, they're good or yes, they're bad on my skin. As you can probably see, I do like a bit of coverage, but I like to apply it really, really lightly. So brands that bring out really full coverage foundations usually have some really awesome wear times that go along with it, and generally decent oil control. So that's why I like to go for something that's higher coverage and sheer it out, because I just feel like it lasts a lot better than taking something that's quite low coverage and balmy, building up, building up, building up, and then those layers on my oily skin just end up disintegrating and melting off throughout the day. So that's why I do have quite a lot of full coverage foundations that I am sometimes happy to wear during the day, because I can make them work. So at the end of this, I'm only getting rid of 2 foundations because I just did not like these, and there was no way in hell that I was going to try to pan these because they would lead to anger and frustration and bad makeup days. The rest of the foundations, good makeup days, or I can make them work. These I could not make work. They looked bad on my oily skin. I did not enjoy them. I do not enjoy them. So Becca Ultimate Coverage, see you later, and Covergirl Outlast Active, see you later. I'm getting rid of them. I'm also going to target 3 foundations in the upcoming months to use up. So that is the Mecca Life Proof, the L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Matte, and the MAC Studio Fix Fluid Foundation. So these are good enough to use up and not waste. I can definitely make them work, but I feel like I've got better things in my collection that do a similar thing, just a little bit more reliable, a little bit easier to apply, or a little bit better longevity out of it. So these are the ones that you'll be seeing in my project pans throughout the next few months. All right, so that's what I currently have in my foundation stash, and my ultimate goal over the next year or 2 is to use a lot of these up to only have like 2 in each category. Realistically, I only need like 2 full coverage, maybe 2 medium coverage, and I'm like a powder foundation. So I do want to whittle these down to like the best of the best, and just either when I use something up, replace it with something that's new and that intrigues me, or to repurchase my favorite. So that's what my ultimate goal is. And if I could declutter more of these to get there, I would be like, yes, I'm keen to do it. But realistically, testing these out, a lot of these surprised me at how good they were. And depending, it doesn't even matter what the price point is. They can be expensive, they can be drugstore. I was quite surprised at how I enjoyed a lot of these. So yeah, I'm going to work through them. I'm going to get love out of them, and I'm not going to buy any foundations until I say that, and I actually bought one the other week. Oh well, I'm not going to buy any more foundations to add to this for at least a good year or so until I whittle these down. But for when I do start buying more foundations in the future, I'd love to know what your favorite foundation is, what sort of coverage is it, what skin types it's good for. I'd love to know what your ultimate foundation is, just out of curiosity. So leave your favorites in the comments, and also let me know, how many foundations do you currently have in your stash? I'm curious, because there's, what, 15 here? Yeah, it's quite a bit. Anyway, this video has been in the making for probably about 5 months now, so I'm glad it's done, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.